My name is Guy Wallace, and I'd like to talk you through the management areas of performance for the support level of our four-level model. All of this is covered in my book, Management Areas of Performance, which is available as a free PDF file on my website. More on that later. There are four areas of performance in the support level of the model, and they are S1, Process Design and Redesign. S2, Human Assets Management. S3, Environmental Assets Management. S4, Special Assignments. The support areas of performance of management at level 4 of our model, the foundation, are performed to one extent or another by all managers in the enterprise. These are about putting everything in place necessary to the process, including the processes themselves and both the people assets and the non-people assets necessary to enable those processes to perform and meet the required metrics of the various stakeholders. As we have been generalizing about which levels focus where in the four-level model, this level is typically the domain of middle management. But again, as always, it depends. These efforts are accomplished so that the leadership goals and plans and budgets achieve the desired end game goals of the core systems, processes in particular, and of all other AOPs. Again, generalizing which level of management does what, the executives would tend to approve this level's activities, plans, and resources. Middle managers would spend most of their time in this level of the model requesting from executives and then providing the human and environmental assets required by the first-line supervisors and their staffs of individual contributors to get their work performance accomplished. First-line supervisors would tend to participate in this level by requesting changes and improvements for their work processes, and in the human asset and environmental assets necessary, and in managing, and in directing and monitoring the human assets and environmental assets necessary to get the job done. Still, as always, it depends. It depends on the total layers of management of the enterprise, and the cultural norms in place, and the management practices of the enterprise. Next, let's look at the management support areas of performance of S1, Process Design and Redesign. This is relevant to you if you are involved in making changes to the existing processes in terms of their process flow, steps, inputs, individual contributors' roles and responsibilities, etc. The process design redesign area of performance involves the design or redesign of business processes within the scope of the manager, or for processes that they own that may or may not extend beyond their functions' organization's boundaries. Examples of processes that extend beyond one's turf is a marketing process for new product development that would typically cross through non-marketing organizations and whose successful redesign effort would require active participation of engineering, manufacturing, sales, and service, at least for a manufacturing-oriented enterprise. Merchandising would be different. The point is, someone somewhere should be accountable for each process in the enterprise and own it, and be responsible to the stakeholders in a balanced view for continuous improvement, incremental improvement, and or discontinuous improvement, radical improvement, as needed by your specific situation. The support areas of performance kick into place when the executives of the enterprise, in conjunction with the appropriate manager, decides that redesign, increment or radical, of their process is called for, as a result of either their estimation of the costs of conformance to stakeholder metrics or the cost of nonconformance to the stakeholder metrics, and return on investment, return on net assets, and other appropriate metrics. Typical outputs for this area of performance include process, design, or redesign documentation. That can include process maps, value stream maps, ABC data, human performance models, enabling matrices for human assets and environmental assets, policies, methods and procedures, specification for new tools, systems, materials, etc. The tasks of this area of performance typically include mapping the current state as is, with a team of master performers from all portions of the current process, mapping the future state to be process with a team of master performers who are process participants in the current state and understand the issues, the problems, and opportunities of that current state. It could also include subject matter experts who have knowledge or insight about any future state issues, such as regulatory issues, policy issues, technology issues, and competitive issues. The effort could also include downstream customer representatives who can represent the process's outputs users and ensure that their needs drive the output of the future state process and products, and help the process participants begin to determine the impact, feasibility, and cost implications for any change requirements for their inputs for the future state process. Upstream supplier representatives can also represent the suppliers and begin to determine the impact and feasibility and cost implications for any changes on their parts upstream, developing all of the other documentation per enterprise standards, requirements, and practices, or as locally determined, whichever is appropriate. Communicating and transmitting all of the new process documentation for reviews, approvals, and as inputs to other organizations based on their need to know. Tasks also include developing an implementation plan and then immediately or as quickly as possible, but slowly as prudent, implementing the plan to make the changes, either all at once or pilot testing incrementally as needed before a full rollout. Once you've defined performance competence here as the task capability to produce outputs to stakeholder requirements, you can systematically derive the specific and not generic enabling competencies, attributes, and values required for peak performance. What are the compliance, marketplace, enterprise, business, interpersonal, and professional and technical knowledge and skills required for your specific situation? And what are the required enabling physical attributes, psychological attributes, intellectual attributes, and personal values required for peak performance? Next, management support area performance, human assets management. This is relevant to you if you are involved in job and organization design or redesign, staff planning, succession systems, recruiting, selection, training and development, appraisal, performance management, compensation, and small or non-monetary rewarding for human performance. The human asset planning and management area performance involves doing the actual HR type work or working in conjunction with HR personnel in the design of the jobs and of the organization, and then planning and managing the systems for staff planning, succession, recruiting, selection, training, development, assessment, compensation, and recognition and rewards. This is one of the more complex components of any manager's job. Typical outputs for this area of performance include job and organization designs, which can include job descriptions and qualification requirements, organization charts, reporting relationships, organization vision, mission, value statements, staffing plans based on workload volumes and budget allocation or restrictions for headcount. A plan is produced identifying the numbers of people in all jobs for each planning period, depending on the nature of the organization's work volumes and variation, seasonally driven or not, including both permanent employees and temporary employees. This plan would also identify the sources for the people. Succession plans, based on the need to move people up, over, or out, and with other turnover, a plan for filling the staffing plan's needs to be developed, identifying the sources internally or externally, and the timing required. Recruiting plans. Based on the details and timing of the succession plans, a recruiting plan needs to be developed and implemented, including the development and placement or dissemination of job postings and advertisements, initial screening mechanisms, testing and review for various capabilities and issues. Selected job candidates. Based on job candidate interviews and possible further testing, per all legal and policy requirements and restrictions, candidates are ranked for making offers. Job offers. Job offers are made to candidates in the order of their previous ranking, including information regarding all compensation and benefits, orientation and training for all new employees, performance appraisals and assessments done routinely or as needed, formally or informally. Disciplinary actions based on the appraisal or assessment of an individual or team's performance and any discrepancies uncovered. Disciplinary actions are considered per any legal and policy requirements and restrictions. This action taken could include counseling, verbal warnings, written warnings, suspensions with or without pay, and possibly termination. Any disciplinary action plan might be created and reviewed with and agreed to by the employee and or human resources staff. Development plans per the assessment of performance and the determination of root causes if the cause is an awareness, knowledge, or skill deficiency. Compensation and benefits administration based on the individual and or team performance. Compensation is administered per the enterprise systems requirements. Rewards and recognition based on the individual and or team performance. Various rewards and recognitions are administered per all legal and policy requirements and restrictions. That could include small monetary rewards, large monetary rewards, prizes, public and private acknowledgments of a job well done, etc. The typical tasks involved in this area of performance include designing and redesigning jobs and the organizations, developing staffing plans, developing succession plans, developing recruiting plans, selecting job candidates to make offers to, making job offers, developing orientation and training plans and implementing them, conducting performance appraisals and assessments, taking disciplinary action as needed, developing and managing a development plan, administering compensation and benefits, administering rewards and recognitions. Once you've defined performance competence here as the task capability to produce outputs to stakeholder requirements, you can systematically derive the specific and not generic enabling competencies and attributes required for peak performance. What are the compliance and marketplace and enterprise and business and interpersonal and professional technical knowledge and skills required for your specific situation? And what are the required enabling physical attributes, psychological attributes, intellectual attributes, and personal values required for peak performance? Next, Management Support Area Performance, S3, Environmental Assets Management. This is relevant to you if you're involved in the acquisition, development, maintenance of the non-human assets necessary to the processes. The environmental assets planning and management area performance involves the planning for, acquisition of, implementation of, and assessment of all of the non-human or environmental assets within the scope of the leader's or manager's accountability. This is also one of the more complex components of a manager's job. Typical outputs can include relevant data and information made available for yourself and for others regarding work performance, including policies, procedures and process guidelines, work orders, customer feedback, process performance results data, quality results data, quantity results data, cost results data, cycle time results data. Outputs could also include materials and supplies made available for yourself and subordinates for the performance of their work, raw goods and end product components, process consumables. Additional outputs include tools and equipment made available for yourself and your subordinates to support their work performance, including hand tools, power tools, computers, software and application programs, machinery, vehicles, etc. Additionally, facilities and grounds need to be made available for yourself and your subordinates to support your work performance requirements, including buildings, parking facilities, storage facilities, furniture, utilities, including electrical, water, gas, phone lines, etc. Another output is the budget and headcount that's made available for yourself and your subordinates to support their work performance requirements, including expense budgets, capital budgets, headcount budgets. In addition, another output required are the culture and consequences as appropriate created by you to support you and your subordinates in the performance of your work, including openness and trust, risk tolerance, acceptance, or encouragement, etc. The typical tasks of this area of performance include determining the process, feedback, measuring, and monitoring data requirements, setting up systems or otherwise to obtain the data needed in a user-friendly configuration to achieve the process performance objectives, determining the process performance material and supply requirements, setting up systems or otherwise obtaining the material and supplies needed by the process, determining the process performance tools and equipment and acquiring those, determining the process performance facilities and ground requirements and obtaining those, determining the process performance budget and headcount requirements and obtaining those, determining the process performance culture and consequence requirements and effecting that. Once you define performance competence here as the task capability to produce outputs to stakeholder requirements, you can systematically derive the specific and not generic enabling competencies and attributes and values required for peak performance. What are the compliance, marketplace, enterprise, business, interpersonal, and professional technical knowledge and skills required for your specific situation? And what are the required enabling physical attributes, psychological attributes, intellectual attributes, and personal values required for peak performance? Next, Management Support Area Performance, S4, Special Assignments. The Special Assignments Area Performance is a catch-all and is sometimes known as Other Duties as Assigned. Most leadership or management jobs have them. In fact, almost all jobs have them, with the exception of union representative or highly regulated job positions. It's at this point that you will have to determine what these special assignments are that are part of your job, or the job that you're looking at, that have not been covered thus far in the model. Again, this is a catch-all. Once you define performance competence here as the task capability to produce outputs to stakeholder requirements, you will be able to systematically derive the specific and not generic enabling competencies, attributes, and values required for peak performance. For each special assignment, you'll need to determine the compliance, marketplace, enterprise, business, interpersonal, and professional and technical knowledge and skills required for your specific situation. And what are the required enabling physical attributes, psychological attributes, intellectual attributes, and personal values required for peak performance? Well, that's it in a podcast nutshell, so to speak. Management Areas of Performance is a flexible workbook to guide you beyond generic competencies, well-meaning but ineffectual, and will have you systematically and systemically defining the performance competencies and enabling competencies and attributes and values that are really required by the specifics of your current and or future enterprise process performance requirements. Again, the Management Area Performance Workbook is available as a free PDF file at my website, www.eppic.biz. That's epic with 2 P's, .biz. And you can reach me, Guy Wallace, via the website as well. Thank you for listening and for pursuing performance. Achieve peak performance to protect and improve the enterprise. Have a great day.